Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today we'll be talking about how to get the 70s or early metal tone. We're talking about bands like Judas Priest, Black Sabbath, Diamond Head, and many others of that time. Unfortunately, I've seen many videos on the internet just discussing the rock aspect and not really diving into just the 70s metal tone, which is, I think, one of the most important eras in heavy metal history, because heavy metal started in the 70s. As usual, we'll first talk about the guitar, then we'll talk about amps, and then effects. So for the guitars, I would say humbuckers are, a rule of thumb, are the best types of pickups for heavy metal. However, P90s will do the job. Even just single coil pickups in general can do the job, because the thing about 70s heavy metal was not really just trying to get that much power. It was more about the technique and the feeling and the guitar playing. Alright, so now let's talk about the amplifiers. You have two options. You either use the distortion in the amplifier if you have it, or you can use a distortion pedal. Both can work, both are technically the same. In my case, I'm using the Roland Jazz Chorus behind me, and I have the Empress Heavy in the front of it. However, if you see the picture, you will see I'm not using lots of gain. It's at 9 o'clock. The one thing that and I think this is the most important, crucial part of this video, is how to set up your distortion. First of all, only use distortion. Don't use overdrive pedal in front of your distortion. Don't use, tube screamer or any of that. The purpose of a tube screamer really usually is to get more power. And as I already said, the purpose of this video is not really to get more gain. It's to get that authentic 70s sound. So just stick to your distortion, whether it is a distortion channel or a distortion pedal in the front of a clean channel. Both would work fine. Now when it comes to EQ, I'm not going to tell you scoop the mids. I'm not going to tell you to have a bright sound or a dark sound. So definitely it's really up to you. However, this is the most important part of this video. How to set up your gain or distortion knob. How much distortion or how much gain you would want. I would say make it as low as possible. If you think about it, in the 70s, metal amps or even distortion pedals were not a thing. So all what people had were just the distortion that's coming from the amps that they had, which were not metal amps. So let's take an example of a Plexi Marshall amp, okay? They would crank that up and they would get a healthy amount of gain, but it's nowhere comparable to any of the metal amps we have nowadays, or even the metal distortion pedals. But that's the tricky part. The part where you have to actually use just little gain, because that's the key. So if you listen to my guitar tone, so it's not very chuggy and it doesn't have lots of sustain or compression. It's very dynamic, and because I'm using little gain, just 9 o'clock on my pedal and that's it. So that's the key. That's the important thing, okay? Everything else I will say is just 10% of this video. Stay away from fuzz. No, Black Sabbath never used fuzz. Stay away from fuzz. That's a different genre. That's a stoner metal. I might make another video on that specifically because it's worth it. It's a very different genre. Don't use fuzz. Now let's talk about effects. Wah pedals were there since the 60s. I would say there is no harm in using wah pedals at all. Wah is just synonymous with all eras, all genres. So you can use it, that's fine. Now let's talk about modulation. Now in the 70s, especially metal music, there weren't lots of modulation being used. The only two exceptions I could think about are phasers and tremolo effects. The thing about phasers, I would still not recommend that, honestly, because if I turn on the phaser, all you're gonna hear is 80s metal. Yes, it was available in the 70s, but it doesn't mean that it was used by metal artists in the 70s. The only modulation I think that could work without really hurting your vibe is the tremolo effect. So if I play something like this, it's very interesting. I think it really depends on the application. Now let's talk about time-based effects, because most of the time you might make a mistake, or some people might make a mistake when they are trying to use delay or reverb to get that 70s metal tone. Now first of all, let's just go back in history and see what time-based effects were available in the 70s. In the 70s we had tape delay, like actual tape delay, like the whole unit. It was not very popular in the 70s metal, so that's not going to be the best option for that. The only thing is the Bucket Brigade, Memory Man, Electroharmonic, awesome invention. In other words, it's the analog delay, the actual analog delay pedals. Now, still, by the way, they are not very popular in the 70s, at least with metal bands. Yet, I mean, they became popular in the 80s, and this is where effects started being more audible to us as listeners. But the one thing that you have to understand is the way you use your delay is crucial. The way I'm using delay right now, by the way, like it sounds like... Can you even tell there is a delay? Let me turn it off and see how it sounds like. Now what I'm doing is I'm using a very short delay, very short, just one rep, and the volume or the mix is low, so you barely hear it, but you barely hear it just right after it. Delay gives you that opportunity to sound bigger, to give you the illusion that you have more sustain or more gain, but you really still maintain that tone, that low gain 70s metal tone. And this is what's so awesome about delay in general. Delay effects are, diverse on depending on how you use them. Now let's move into reverb. In the 70s, only plate and spring reverb were available. My recommendation is don't use reverb, but I love reverb. It just gives you that extra layer of depth without really altering your tone too much. Similar to the effect of the delay, what it does to your overall guitar tone. Now, I would recommend Spring Reverb because Spring Reverb was probably the most commonly used reverb in the 70s. Not necessarily with metal, but what I would recommend to get that 70s feeling in general, if you insist on using reverb. By the way, I'm using Spring Reverb also. I would recommend definitely Spring Reverb. So that's it for this video. I know this is one of these very straightforward videos that I didn't really tell you to use so many effects, or you gotta do this and you gotta do that, and so many details. But that's the thing, it's simple, but if the knowledge is not available, then what's the point? That's really it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. There are more videos to come soon, so subscribe and like to support the channel, and thank you for watching.